Howdy there. Welcome to another episode of the Playing in the Sandbox podcast, where we are deeply committed to inspiring action in today's leaders. And in the Sandbox today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that I believe is going to captivate many leaders in different organizations of all sizes as they get into this content of why leaders need to be asking better questions. Now, if you know me at all, you know that I'm not one to just use the word need. I don't just float it out there. It's a choose to, get to, want to world. I believe that to be true. However, in this situation, when leaders can get a hold of the idea that they need to be asking better questions, it's going to transform their team, transform their productivity, and transform a lot of those issues that they've been facing and chasing around that old proverbial mulberry bush for far too long. So let's get into the sandbox, grab your paper and pen, and you're going to want to write down number 1, number 2, and number 3, because I know that you're going to walk away with 1, 2, and 3 things that you're going to want to implement. You're going to walk away with new questions that you're going to want to insert. You're going to walk away with some new knowledge. And when you write down those numbers, it automatically activates your brain into seeking to find 3 things that you can use from the sandbox today. And you want to head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast to get your copy of today's action plan, because there I have even more questions and more tools that you can use for learning how to be a leader that asks better questions. All right, we'll see you in the sandbox. All right. I am super excited to get into this topic of why leaders need to be asking better questions. But I kind of want to back up a little bit and say, and give you some context as to why I have discovered that this is really an important key topic for leaders in the workplace today. You know, I have a lot of conversations with leaders that have a very direct model of communication, which I personally really enjoy. I am a very direct communicator myself. However, I've learned how to finesse that directness into questions so that it doesn't paralyze people. It doesn't stymie people. It doesn't push them away, because I'm so direct and I'm just like, get to the point, man. Bottom line it. Let's go. What's the issue? Great. I don't need the story. Don't be storytelling with me. But what I have discovered through the power of questioning is that when I'm direct as a leader, or when you are direct as a leader and you're going right at a topic, you're often shutting the mind of the person on the other side of the conversation off to even exploring their own solutions or alternatives to the problem or alternatives to the challenge, or how to create a different plan so that we get different results. Because you go into tell mode, you go into direct mode. And I know when I've done that in the past, I've seen teams or I've seen individuals deflate because I'm taking away the power of them to come up with their own conclusions and decisions. And yes, as powerful, bold leaders, we definitely can see the problem and we can see the solution and we can understand the path to get there far before most people in the room. But here's the reality, friend. As that powerful leader, it's up to us to also develop that skill set that we're wanting in the people around us. And we do that through questions, because powerful questions draw people out and they draw out the best in people. When we are point shoot style delivery, or we're just telling people, or we're just commanding people or directing people, we're actually taking charge. And that's what leads to the fatigue. And that's what leads to the frustration. And that's what leads to the feeling of overwhelm, even in some folks, and just that questioning of what the heck am I doing and why am I even here as a leader, because no one's listening. Well, yeah, because you're not asking, you're telling. And if you think about your kids, or if you've ever hung around any little kids for any period of time, you know, you can tell them and they'll do and they'll take action, but it doesn't mean that you're setting them up. And you've seen this where it's not necessarily setting them up for success to be able to accomplish that task in the future on their own. But when you pause and you show and you talk to them about the why behind you want them to do something a certain way or need them to do something a certain way, what happens? Oh my goodness. All of a sudden they have the confidence to be able to do it the next time, and you're not there directing them every step of the way. Well, friend, remember the sandbox. Our adults in the workplace are just kids grown up in adult clothes. And some of those behaviors that are no longer serving because someone coddled them as a kid, now you've got them in the workplace. The best way you can shift that in the showing and the seeking and telling them why is the questioning what's in it for them, questioning why is it important for them to do it the way that we need it done, or why it's important for them to complete this task on time, or why is it, what's the value for them in being in this position. I try to stay away some from the why questions, even though I just gave you a list of them. Why questions serve a purpose to get people to seek and get, I think, to get into that emotion. But you want to be careful with the why questions because it can also come accusatory and it can become kind of adversarial and it puts people on the defensive. But what questions or how questions draw people out because it gets them into thinking toward a solution versus going into the defensive. See, questions create understanding for both sides of every conversation. And that's really key in why we want to use better questions. It creates understanding for both sides of the conversations when we question from the position of curiosity and seeking to understand. See, I want to understand, yes, the why someone did that, but I want to understand what motivated them to make that decision, or what motivated them to miss that deadline. I want to ask what was going on for them that caused them to not show up on time for work or for that meeting. Or what is it that was happening in their office that distracted them off of meeting the important deadline or fulfilling the commitment that they made. You know, I've said this before in the sandbox, the difference between responsibility and accountability. And now I've had people challenge that and say, well, Tammy, it's really the same thing. Well, yes, and no, it is. However, no, it's different when we as the leader frame it as, I'm here to remind you of the responsibility that you committed to, because I want you to hold yourself accountable to that responsibility. Am I holding them accountable technically? Well, yes. And I'm teaching them and I'm showing them and I'm modeling for them that it's their accountability to self, their accountability and responsibility to the commitment that they made to do the task completely, to get it done on time, to communicate effectively if they were going to miss a deadline, those types of things. And when I'm seeking to understand, I want to get to the understanding of what they see their responsibility was when they're missing an assignment or when they're missing the mark at work. Now, questions aren't always for correcting. They're not always for corrective actions. When you're asking better questions at the front end of a conversation, a good open-ended question at the front end of giving an assignment or setting an expectation, you're actually creating in the momentum the ability for people to be thinking on their own and to be thinking of what resources they need to be successful, and who do they want to pull in to help be successful at this project, or what's the timeline that they realistically can commit to because of all the other workload that they have on their desk. You see, open-ended questions don't end in a yes or a no answer. Open-ended questions are thought-provoking and they get people to think. And when we're setting expectations and we can say, hey, Joe, this is the project that we've got. Tell me how you see this how this being completed most successfully, right? I'm asking him how he's going to get that done and how he sees that being done completely. I may already know. And now, listen, friend, there are some of you right now that are going, Tam, I just don't have time to ask all these darn questions. Every episode, I'm talking about questions, right? You're talking about questions, and I just don't have that time. I need people there are times I just need to get people to get things done. You're right. You do. But in so doing, when you just need to get things done, friend, and you just need to point and shoot and get information out there, I'm going to challenge you to say, you may in the moment because it's an emergent need. You may in a moment because the timeline is short. You may in the moment because you know what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And you just need somebody because you're trying to spread yourself out. You're trying to delegate more. I got it. I got it. You're trying to replicate yourself in ways so that you can do more and people around you can do more and you get more done. I got it. And when you're constantly in that point and shoot style delivery, you're creating an environment where people, as I said, don't need to think for themselves because they're waiting for you to tell them what to do. And what I know to be true with leaders that have that as a driving force, they're frustrated because their people aren't being creative, because their people aren't being proactive. Big word, proactive, because their team members are just simply waiting and you're wondering, what the heck are you doing? Because I'm the one that's having to give you all the instructions. Yes. Why? Because of that mindset of sometimes I just got to tell them to do it and I got to get it done quickly and I don't have time to ask them a question. Cool. There are the times where point and shoot is necessary. Point shoot's delivery model is necessary. And there's also a piece of it as a follow up to follow up with the individual. And maybe it's sending a 37-second email. Maybe it is sending a 37-second text through Teams or whatever, Slack or whatever you use as a mode of communication in the office. Maybe it is that to send them a quick follow up to say, thanks. I know I just peppered you with a lot of information. Let me know what questions you have and what resources you're going to need to be successful with this, because I understand your commitment is to complete it by this date. That took less than 30 seconds to type that up and send that off. So then at least the person on the other side knows you're still inquiring about their resource need. You're still inquiring about how they're going to get it done for them. Why is that important? Well, because our people in today's workforce want to be seen and they want to be acknowledged for the work that they're doing, that it's making a difference and that they're having an impact. Is everybody that way? No. Is the majority of people that way? And do I think with the younger generation coming into the workforce that we're going to have more of that? Yes, absolutely. We're going to be retiring the folks that like that bottom line direct point and shoot style delivery, and they can be creative because they were raised in an era where creativity was necessary. But now we're going into an environment where that's not the case. And the majority of our workforce is moving into, they want to be included in decisions. They want to feel included in the plan. They want to be included in how we're going to get something done and completed. And they want to be asked. So friend, start with asking better questions. Questions through they help you cut through the storytelling. A lot of times when people get caught off of not, they get caught not doing a task or completing a project, or they missed a budget item or whatever it is that might have just erupted, they'll go into storytelling. And for us as high performing, high impact leaders, storytelling is like nails on the chalkboard. Can I get an amen? It is like, I don't want to hear the story. I appreciate you have one, but I don't want to hear the story. I want to hear what you're going to do with it. And I'm okay being direct saying that. I appreciate, Sam, that you've got a story to tell me, and I actually don't want to hear the story right now. I just want to know what you're going to do to fix it, because you're 4 days late on this and you've now made my timeline extended. And that's difficult for me to grasp and grapple with. And so that we can have a plan, I need to know what that is before I come in and just tell you what it is. I want you to be a part of it, but don't tell me the story around it, because Sam's going to go into the whole storytelling of the why it happened that way and why he didn't and why they didn't make it, on time or whatever the story is going to be, because, my dog ate my homework, right? It's that kind of a storytelling. Powerful questions cut through the storytelling. So you want to ask them, so what is it that you're going to do? And then when we get that plan, we can go back and do an after action review and a conversation as a follow up, not to have the story continue, but to find out the root cause of what got in the way so that we correct the behavior in the future. You see, again, I know there's people that are going, Tam, again, I'm waving the white flag. Help me out here. I don't have that kind of time. Don't you know? Well, you don't have that kind of time because you've created it where your people need you to answer all of their questions for them. And you've created it to where your people need you to be creative. They don't know how to because you've not allowed it. You've not invited it. You've not invited it through your questions. And what I'm offering is a way that you can start giving questions, discovering what's possible. Right? Because when leaders are telling and directing versus discovering with questions, they're putting upon their team their own beliefs and their own standards. I'm putting upon the team my belief of how it should be done and my standard of how it should be done. Don't should all over yourself is what I like to say. But we're pushing that on them. And when we push our beliefs and our standards on our team, we stifle them. So all of those things that you're saying that you want in your team, and I see it all the time, and I love it when I go in and work with leaders that are like, Tammy, I need to work on my communication. I need help. I know that my team's not communicating effectively. Great. How are you doing, leader? Talk to me about the questions that you use. Talk to me about how your conversations go. Take me through a corrective action conversation. Take me through a difficult conversation when someone's not meeting the the needs that you have, or they're not meeting the needs of their position. Take me through a conversation when you have a rebellious individual on your team that you think understands everything and you've given them clear instructions, but they're still doing it their way and it's going against the grain. Tell me how you handle those conversations. And I can find out instantaneously that we're telling, we're not asking. We want to be in discovery mode versus directing. When we have underperforming teams, one of the key issues as leaders is that we're not doing our part to model asking questions to get that creativity started. And we push those beliefs and standards on people and it stifles them. Okay. So, how do we start to shift it? Because what I believe is when we have a challenge with a person, and let's say they're not following through on things, right? We don't want to ask them, we don't want to make them wrong for that. We don't want to make an individual wrong for what they're doing. We want to evoke out of being curious ourselves the why behind it. What's in their way? What got them stuck? What kept them from asking for help? See, if you're modeling or when you're modeling asking really great questions, you're actually opening it up to others asking for help when they need it instead of feeling like they got to sit in their office or sit in their cubicle, head down, and just try to grind through and not get things done. And, I had a conversation, it's been a while ago, with a leader who's a middle manager, whom, I love our demoralized middle managers because they have one of the hardest tasks, which is figuring out how to communicate up and communicate down. And they're stuck in the middle, right? And they're being pulled and stretched in two different directions. And this middle manager was stuck because they had a need that of a project that was to be completed. And they had an individual who was, I'm going to say, lazy. That's the best way I can put it. They were lazy. They were lazy on the job. And they were not showing up to work on time. They weren't getting their work done. And this manager was really struggling because they were getting pressure from above to deal with the issue of the person, but they were also getting pressure from the other team members, right? The other team members that they were having to pick up the slack because this individual wasn't. And I remember talking with this leader and this manager, and they said, you know, I've been telling Sandra how to get this done. I've been telling Sandra what I needed for the job. I've been telling Sandra what timeline needed to be completed by. And Sandra kept telling me, yes, she was going to get it done. And yes, she was going to have it and there wasn't going to be a problem. And sure, she was going to show up to work on time. But the behaviors weren't changing. I said, so start asking different questions. And let's start with, what needs to help you with changing? These are the behaviors, right? Situation, behavior, impact. Here's a situation. Here's the behavior. Here's the impact. Situation is, Sandra, you keep giving me a lot of lip service and I don't see that you're getting done what needs to be done. And the behaviors of that are you're showing up to work late and you're avoiding responding to emails and you're hibernating in your office and not actually communicating with your team. And the impact of that is others are having to pick up the workload, right? So there you go. That's the basics of an SBI. And so now the question that I have for you, Sandra, is what do we want to do about this? What is it that I can count on you for? Or what do you see the impact that you're making, right, is having not only on you, but on the others? Talk to me about that. I want to get them emotionally connected to the impact that they're making, because then I can start infusing them with questions to get Sandra to perform and to understand if she even wants to be here. I am perfectly okay with inviting people into different opportunities and helping them to find out that they want a different opportunity because I'm asking really great questions to understand the why behind why they're in the position they're in and what it is that motivates them to be there and what they see that they could have as an impact to positively impact the team and impact the work. You see, this manager didn't know how to ask the questions. They just thought by pointing it out that somehow miraculously Sandra was going to figure it out. Well, guess what, friend? They were pointing out their standards and their beliefs that they were putting on the individual. And Sandra was not in the same frame of mind, didn't have the same beliefs, didn't have the same standards. So we had a disconnect. And the only way we can get back to being connected is ask questions. Do we recognize what that impact is? And do we recognize that we're actually missing the mark by not following the set of standards that we have agreed to as a team, right? Asking questions gets Sandra to understand that. And when this manager got a hold of it, all of a sudden, Sandra's performance turned around. They were more closely connected. The team was more cohesive. We worked through some of the trust factors on the team as well. It was a small team. We worked through some of the trust factors because people were still flinching every time Sandra's name came up to work on a project because of past performance. So we worked through that. And now the team is thriving. Now the team is performing. Sandra feels more included in the team. And the manager feels that they can breathe because they're able to communicate now more of the why, what was happening, and what, more importantly, what we're doing to fix it. That's what your people above you want to know, middle manager. The people below you want to know that you're in it with them and you're going to be there as a resource and help them to identify what resources they need to be able to solve their problem. But your leadership above you wants to know you've got the plan to solve the problem. That's it. That's how we create a more through thread, if you will, at that middle manager level through asking better questions. So I can then above tell what's going on and continue to ask below so I can pass that information up. That's it. All right. So let's get to the key to good questions. I've gotten into a lot of the why around it and why it's important, and now I want to get into what are the keys. The key to a good question is this: they're open ended, right? They don't just end with a yes or a no, right? They're open ended and they're creating that that creativity. They're opening up creativity and in the mind of the person that you've asked the question to, and they evoke thought and consideration on the other person, right? That's that opening up the mind to evoke thought and consideration. Great questions also challenge assumptions for you and for the other individual. They challenge assumptions not because I'm challenging to put you down and why did you do it that way. It's, hey, help me understand, Joe. How did we get to this end result? This was the goal and the target. How did we get here? Right? Or challenging people, even one of my other favorite ones is when you're bringing people into a conversation, and maybe it is a corrective conversation. Start with, so tell me, Sandy, why are we here? Tell me, Fred, why are we here today? What brings us to this conversation today? Let them tell you. I tell you what, your people know what you're calling them into the office for. They might actually have a whole list of things you didn't even have because you didn't know all that they're doing in the workplace, but they know. So start with a question. Have them start talking to you. It a good question takes away the emotion and it takes away the accusation and it challenges assumptions on behaviors or the why behind it, and it opens it up to somebody asking. It cuts to the core of the behavior that you may be wanting to see change. And that's really important. Powerful questions cut to the core of the behavior that you may be wanting to see change. And they expose the deep rooted why or beliefs of another person that may be impacting their performance, right? Great, powerful questions enhance problem solving because we're all for one, one for all. We're in it together and we're going to get through to solution. And great questions build trust. When you come and ask me questions, I'm not on the defensive. I can trust that it's a safe environment for me to move into and step into boldly, even if I don't have the answer. I know and trust that we're going to get there together. And powerful questions move you through conflict quicker toward potential solutions. Another big one, right? We can get into conflict and fingers start pointing and words start flying and body language comes into it and I'm shutting down and voices are elevated and facial expressions get into it. My facial expressions out me every time. I'm not going to lie. And for my facial friends out there that have that challenge, I'm sending you the virtual high five. It's okay. Questions will get us through it. But they move us through conflict quicker and toward a potential solution. And that's really important to note. And why is that important? Because when we can move through conflict, right, more swiftly and with less bruises, it again goes back to that trust, but it also goes back to the efficacy that I can see myself in this job. I can see myself in this team and I can see myself succeeding here, even when we're in conflict. We don't hold on to it because we've asked questions to move us through it. So we understand the root cause of it. We understand what got us there and what behaviors or actions we're going to change to take us out of there. It creates engagement, and even empowerment for your people, right? And most importantly, powerful questions improve communication and they ultimately foster that open dialogue that you all say that you want. And the way that we get to powerful questions is pushing the pause button. You've heard me talk about the power of pause, right? Push the pause button and then ask the next best question. Push the pause button. I think that's actually in episode 25. You might want to go take a listen on the power of pause. You want to push the pause button, take a breath, disengage your brain from whatever emotional reaction you're having in the moment, and think about what's the question that I want to ask. And it's a what question and even a how question. And it doesn't mean the how the heck did you get here, John? It's so, John, help me understand. How did we get to this place? And then I'm just going to pause and let John talk, right? You want to think about those questions. And when you head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast and click on this episode today, you're going to get a resource list of powerful questions. And you're going to be able to get some information on how to construct really great questions. And I actually am working on a new course as well on this very topic because I know I teach this stuff to organizations. I teach this stuff to leaders and through my coaching clients all the time. I frame up how to ask really great questions. And sometimes I'll say, so what were you hoping about stating it that way? And then someone will tell me, and I said, well, what would a question be you could ask instead? And if you can just do that for yourself, right? Ask yourself, what was I hoping to get out of that? Or going into a conversation in preparation, what am I hoping to get as an outcome? All right. Then take 2 minutes and figure out what are the questions that I want to ask. You can tell me all day long that you don't have the time, but friend, you don't have the time not to. Because by point and shooting out and delivering your information in a really, direct manner, or maybe you have an avoidant behavior pattern, right? Maybe you avoid talking to people altogether and you just don't want to address it with them. And you just come back to fixing it and doing it for them. I know many a leader that do that. They just let their employees off the hook and they bail them out and they go do the work for them. Well, by not asking the employee question, you've now given yourself much more work, yours and theirs, to do on your plate. And that's why you don't feel that you have the time to be able to ask them a question. You want to free yourself up, friend? Start getting better at asking questions. Make it a great day. Okay, we have covered a lot in the sandbox today around why leaders need to be asking better questions. And I'm using the word need intentionally because at this point in our conversations here in the sandbox, it's important for you to know that as a leader, there are those times where need is a specific point we want to make. And when you get a hold of the idea of asking better questions, taking the time to ask better questions, it's going to be a game changer for you. I have no doubt. And I am grateful that you spent time in the sandbox with me today. If you may find yourself, leader, as one of those individuals that does not struggle with asking powerful questions, like you may be great at asking questions, but you're still not getting the results that you're wanting, then two things: either A, we don't have the right seats in seats, or B, our accountability structure isn't in place. And actually, I'll say a third thing: maybe your questions aren't as great as you really actually perceive and believe them to be, or they're not the right placed questions. So what I'd encourage you to do is head on over, as I said before, tammyjbond.com/podcast. Click on this episode, get your list of powerful questions to ask, and the resources available to you there on how to do just that. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can do that through the website as well to ask me your question. And I am happy to bring it into a future episode. And I'm happy to set up a one-on-one conversation with you, even if you're interested in learning how to ask better questions, because I think that they are such a powerful resource that is so underutilized. And when our organizations, organizations or our companies do those assessments on the health or culture of our organization, what's working, what's not working, and we're taking the pulse and taking the temperature of all of our employees, and one of the top 3 items that comes up every time, everyone that I've ever seen in 20 years of doing this work, communication is always in the top 3 things that we are not good at in our organization or in our team. And yet it's the one area that we spend the least amount of time focusing on. It's the one area on changing, and it's the one area that we invest the least amount of resources in fixing. And so you've got resources here at tammyjbond.com. So make sure that you reach out and get those, because I want to see you change the trajectory for you and for your team and for your entire organization. So my hope today is that you're leaving the sandbox with tips, tools, and strategies for your personal leadership, your team leadership, and your next bold conversation. And hey, friend, it would mean a lot to me if you would just share this episode with a friend or a colleague that you feel could really benefit from it. Maybe powerful questions aren't something you struggle with, but you know somebody who does. Share this episode with them today so they can get the tools. And third-party affirmations go a long way in today's world economy. And I would be honored if you shared the value that you gain from spending time in the sandbox today. Put a comment where you listen, click share, like this episode, and subscribe so that you can make sure that you get updates when we've posted new content in the sandbox just for you. And don't forget to head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast and get your copy of today's action plan. Now, remember, friend, leadership isn't something that you're born with. It's something that you grow into. And I want to acknowledge and celebrate that you took time today to grow into your next level of leadership. Make it a great day.